Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And today we're talking about The Marvellous Mabel Normand, which is not a film in its own right. It's a collection of 4 films programmed by the BFI.
Yes.
Starring Mabel Normand, a silent star of the 1910s, 1920s. And these films are directed and co-directed by her. They star, alongside her, Charlie Chaplin, Fatty Arbuckle, a young Oliver Hardy.
Yes.
In the last one from 1927. They're accompanied as well by a newly commissioned score by the Meg Morley Trio, who were there performing it. It was put on by Flatpack in Birmingham at the Cathedral in Pigeon Park in the middle, which was nice.
Yes.
It was quite a nice projection, nice big screen, and nice place to be.
Yes, it was lovely. I kind of one of the things that I love about Flatpack is actually these pop-up screenings that they do where
it's not part of the main festival, which is on in April, but they do screenings around the rest of the year as well.
That's right. One of those. And what I love about them is that it brings people to spaces that they wouldn't normally go to. I.e., unless you're a Christian or observant or you would not normally go into Birmingham Cathedral. So if you go, some people, the very first time they go is when they go see a movie like this. And like that for other spaces, for the old College of Art, and they've used cinemas, they've used banks. It's really great, I think, the way that they do that. It's a way of reintroducing people to the city that they live in through kind of slightly tangential contexts. And this is one of them. I'd been before to see Dreyer's Passion of Joan of Arc.
Yeah.
And kind of there is actually something about watching these films in a church, particularly The Passion of Joan of Arc.
Yeah.
Though this felt different, obviously, because they were comedies, and they were very successful comedies. Like, kind of the films are over 100 years old, some of them, and they still made me laugh. They still feel fresh.
I thought 2 of them were successful.
Which 2?
The latter 2. So the films in the programme are Mabel's Blunder from 1914, Mabel's Dramatic Career from 1913, his Trysting Place from 1914, and Should Men Walk Home from 1927. And it's the latter 2 that I liked. The first 2 I thought were pretty boring.
Oh, I didn't find them boring. I thought she was marvellous. I thought she was incandescent. I thought she was brilliant.
I didn't.
Okay.
I thought she was only good in the latter 2, but then I thought the only latter 2 were good pretty much in any way. I really felt very bored and kind of confused by the first 2. I thought they weren't funny enough.
Oh, tell the plot.
And they weren't getting laughs from the audience either. Well, the plot, roughly speaking, of Mabel's Blunder is she works in an office. She's going out with the boss's son, and the boss is also into her. And she then believes that the boss's son is going off with some other woman, and so she sort of chases them down and follows them around and sneaks and this, that and the other. The twist at the very end, spoilers, is it's actually his sister, and they were just hanging out together, and it was her blunder.
Yes.
And the plot of Mabel's Dramatic Career is she's going out with this farmer guy.
Yes.
Who's quite scruffy. His mum is not into it. She's quite a sort of the uptight mother, sort of mother-in-law type. Mabel ends up getting kicked out of the house, basically, and sort of the engagement is called off. And she goes to make it in the movies. And then the kind of latter half of that short is the farmer chap seeing a movie that she appears in, and sort of he still loves her, and he kind of fights with the movie while it's on screen. He tries to fight the villain but through the movie.
Yeah.
So it's kind of his sort of delusion in a way.
Yes.
Not delusion, but he's sort of his passion overtakes him.
Yes.
And he's kind of riled up and ruins the movie for the audience.
I love that. I mean,
that was a fun idea.
I mean, I kind of agree that obviously the Chaplin one is a masterpiece, I think.
Well, we'll get on to the latter two.
Yeah.
But the first two.
Well, what I'm trying to say is that it's true that the latter 2 are better. You know, but I loved seeing the first two. I mean, and actually there was something about Mabel Normand. You remember the beginning, she's typing with her boss, right? And actually just the way she typed, I found funny and engaging.
Yeah.
You know, and kind of all her facial gestures, and you know, she's so alive in the film. It was for me just like a pleasure to watch her. And you know, she's a very pretty woman, a very sexy woman, and she's very funny. You know, which is kind of not usual.
Well, I don't know. I wasn't really taken by any of that, to be honest. I can see what you mean. And again, it comes out more in the latter two films, that her face expressions and these kind of beautiful big eyes that she has.
Yes.
And when she kind of looks in one direction or another, just with her eyes, so you get this kind of, you see the whites of her eyes, kind of,
Yes.
and it's like you know, cartoony almost, cartoony and very expressive. I do like that, and you know, there are kind of aspects to a sort of physical performance. Again, in a kind of in that sort of quote unquote silent film mode of being, you know, kind of almost like mime.
Yes.
You know, heavily sort of exaggerated movements. Again,
Yes.
kind of cartoony. I mean,
Yes, they're communicating to the audience, like,
yeah,
you know, very directly, you know.
yeah,
And actually, they are communicating to the audience. It's almost like they point to it, like, look at this baby, or look at the situation, or,
Yeah.
you know, so kind of...
And in the very first film, Mabel's Blunder, there's very, very little by way of intertitles explaining things. You get a couple right at the start, basically, and then everything else is really done through kind of situation and gesture and blocking and mime and so on, and kind of figuring out in terms of communicating to the audience, you know, everything they need to know. Whereas the second film had an awful lot more in terms of explaining things, sort of piece by piece in intertitles, saying, and now this happens, and now this happens, and now it's this character. So the second one was easier to follow.
Yes.
I think the first one did get kind of confusing. I thought, I just was a little bit confused at points when they introduced a whole cast of characters by the end. And I thought, who are these people?
Well,
But
I didn't...
But it was kind of simple, ultimately, I guess, that she just thinks he's going off with some other woman.
Yes.
But no, they did fail to engage me the first two. You know, it's about that simple. And I don't think it's the case that they're the product of their time, because they're from 1914 and 1913, and the Chaplin one is 1914, and I thought it was fantastic.
Yes.
You know, and I loved every bit of it.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, and you might disagree with me on this, but the intro before they played the four films, there's an intro that appears on screen. It's this whole BFI program, so it's from the BFI saying this and the other about it. Here's Mabel Normand. Here's the people she was appearing with. But make no mistake, Mabel Normand is the star, and you know, in the third one that ain't true. It's Joel Chaplin, and he was getting huge laughs from the audience.
He was. That's true. She was fantastic, though, and their interplay was fantastic. Yeah, I mean, the thing with being with Chaplin is, like, really, he is a genius. You know, there's no question about it. I mean, everything he did was funny. But she was great, too, you know.
She was good. But certainly seeing the Chaplin one amongst three films in which he doesn't appear, if you kind of thought, oh, Chaplin's played out, he's sentimental, blah, 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 whatever it is, all the various problems that people have with Chaplin, to see the Chaplin film amongst those other three, you go, this is why he's a genius. It makes it so clear.
Yes. I think that's true. You know, but I thought she was brilliant. And actually, you understand completely why she was such a big star. And actually, the other thing that she has, you know, that to me Chaplin doesn't have, is that she's a great actress. Like, you feel that she's transparent, that you understand whatever it is that she's feeling. You know?
Yeah, that's true.
Whereas with Chaplin, you know, kind of, he's performing a shtick, right? And he's absolutely brilliant. You know, there's almost no one better. But actually, you don't feel like you're looking at his soul or anything, right? You're looking at, you know, this performance that he's giving you, right?
Perhaps, but
the situation is made very clear. But with Mabel Normand, there's something about her eye. You really get the sense of a person feeling, you know. And she's also performing, and she also does things with her eyes, and you know, the gestures. I love it when she spits in her hand when she's about to sock him, you know. So it's not as if she doesn't have her shtick, but there is something about her face that you get a sense of a feeling person.
Yeah, I think that's true. Though she also does have material to work with here that I think Chaplin doesn't in particular. In this particular film, he's not kind of downtrodden or anything like that. He is a source of fun, basically, and it's her character as his wife who is. I mean, what you see right at the start of the film, she's kind of cooking and dealing with the baby and all this while he's just sitting there with his feet up trying to read a newspaper. So she's the one who has a kind of malaise to express that he doesn't. You know, like the closest he comes to it really is being annoyed that he has to take care of the baby, but it's cartoony. That's all it is from him.
Anyway, she pops alive, and actually I thought that was even more interesting in the last film. What was it called?
The last one was the Chaplin one was called His Trysting Place from 1914, and the last one is Should Men Walk Home from 1927.
Yes,
which is about a couple of burglars.
It's a couple of burglars who meet and they try to con each other, and then they end up trying to pull a job in a billionaire's house. And there also, I thought it was interesting because there as well, she's not quite the star. Yeah, kind of.
It's certainly a two-hander.
Yeah, I think the guy has at least as much to do as her, but I think she steals the show, and she steals the show with a lot, with a lot less to do than he does. He gets a big production number in a fountain, right? She doesn't get any of that.
He does. I think his part in the fountain though is for me that was the kind of central set piece, and again that was getting the biggest laughs from the audience.
But that's not because of the actor. I mean, that's because of the situation and the way that it's filmed.
A little bit. I think the actor the performance was a big part of it.
It's
the way that when he puts
it's a part of it.
He replaces one of the gargoyles and he pretends to be one. It's rather like that in Austin Powers 3 when do you remember Austin Powers having to pretend to be the peeing statue? It's essentially the same set piece as that, but it's done. He's spitting out his mouth instead of pretending to wee. But there are shots where the detective is looking straight at him, knowing that it's him, and he's sort of pretending to carry on, but he's like looking directly at the guy, sort of smirking. It's quite a funny performance because
I think it's a great piece of direction.
It's quite an unusual performance because, like, there's essentially no question that he's actually convincing anyone that he is this gargoyle, but he's just carrying on and having fun.
But I think that's the direction, and that's kind of like the architecture of the scene and the way that it's kind of like, comically designed, but and the actor's a part of it, but he's not the main part of it. Whereas actually, I think Mabel Normand gets very little to do. And there's something at the very beginning, for example, when the car tries to run her down and she ends up kind of running in those high heels, and getting out of the way by leaping onto, this higher ground. I mean, even just the way she moves is funny, right? So, and I think that's very much due to her performance and not to a whole routine kind of being built around her, which actually, it's true that, she doesn't get those big routines in that, in that film. So
well, she doesn't get one as good as his, for sure. But she does have the whole sort of sifting through the soup, for instance, and fighting with Oliver Hardy about getting his soup off him. And he keeps on trying to come back and get.
That's the punch.
A punch, sorry,
yeah.
Whatever. Yeah.
But then he gets that and ends up in the fountain. So she gets things to do, but I think there's nothing as spectacular as he gets, and yet she's incredibly alive, and just so charismatic. I mean, I wouldn't even be able to draw his face now if you asked me to. We've just seen the film, and though he was fine, I don't mean to criticize the actor, but I would be hard pressed to kind of distinguishing from someone else. Whereas to me, she's vivid and alive, and and fascinating. And I'm not just saying that because that's what the program is built around.
I thought she was kind of fine, but I thought the films were kind of. She didn't elevate the first two films in the way that a great performer would have. I don't think.
Well, for me, she did. As I said, I love the way that she indicates with her eyes. There were so many little bits of business, like, just the way that she typed. You know, I kind of when she was in taking the dictation, you know, just kind of the way that she moved and the way that she looked at him, you know, kind of all of those things were like timed. Really, I thought she was brilliant.
Fair enough. I didn't see it myself. I didn't hate her. You know, I liked her. Like I say, I think in the better films, she was better as well. She was part of that, you know, clearly. But I don't think she was. You know, like I say, when it says at the start, "Make no mistake, Mabel Normand was a star," I kind of feel like I don't know if she was really.
Oh well, I had never seen her before this, and I am completely convinced. I mean, to me, she is a revelation. Yeah.
Bloody hell.
No, she is.
Big words.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, you know, her look, her eyes, her movement, you know, that whole skit with the baby, I mean, you know, that takes extraordinary timing, and it's timed with Chaplin. They were almost all done in long takes, you know, kind of. So he's a genius, but she's holding her own, right? And kind of, and I think being much more, you get much more of a sense of a feeling person with her, that she's a real person, you know, not like, you know, this created character that is Chaplin's. Well, he's not really the tramp in this, is he? He's just a husband. But he's already like the tramp in some ways as well, right? You know, part of the walk, the outfit, the bowler hat, you know, the moustache. I mean, he's lacking
the
patches,
attitude.
you know.
Yeah.
So I kind of, I'm, you know, I was very impressed. And actually all the fight scenes in the park were brilliant. I also loved the other woman, you know, who acted very broad, yeah?
Oh, the one on the bench.
The one on the bench, you know. I thought it was wonderful because, you know, I mean, she was very much like pantomime acting, like completely out there, like a cartoon, you know, but it worked so brilliantly.
She is the absolute classic annoyed woman on a bench.
Yeah.
Inside, like, it seems it's an archetype all of its own, I think.
Yeah.
The woman who's not interested. I mean, and this is actually one of the points where I thought, oh God, this is why Chaplin's a genius, which is when he sort of starts to try and cry on her. He doesn't know who she is. She's just a woman on a bench, and for whatever reason, he just starts trying to sort of open up and moan and cry on her, and she's not interested, and she moves away, and he's trying to lie on her, and he gets his cane and pulls her legs towards him so he can lie on them. Yeah. I thought that's a wonderful, that's a brilliant idea, brilliant moment.
Oh my God!
Because and it's that thing of, again, it's super cartoony. Like, you would never do this in real life. You wouldn't do anything close to it. But it makes perfect sense that he would just be so self-obsessed that he would think, I can get away with yanking someone's legs towards me.
That whole routine is brilliant.
It was lovely.
I mean, you know,
that got a big laugh from me.
Yeah, it's so beautifully choreographed. So, you know, he's crying. He needs a handkerchief. He takes his handkerchief. He blows his nose a lot, and then just throws it on her lap. And then she puts it up her sleeve. I mean, my God, that must have taken so long to choreograph that whole thing. It's absolutely brilliant.
I like the score as well.
Yes.
Which we should probably mention. As I say, it was performed live by the Meg Morley Trio, who composed it as well.
Yes.
It was a piano and a double bass and a drum kit. But that's the trio, and I thought it was. I mean, that elevated the movies.
Well, for sure.
Certainly the first couple, it made them lively and engaging and interesting, and combined with it timed really beautifully with the action as well.
I thought too much, though.
Maybe a little bit too much in the first one for me.
Yeah, you know, so kind of you feel that your whole body's shaking to the music in the first few, or maybe it might have just been the first one, you know. But like, there is something about having a live band there. Right, and then just the rhythm, and you find your whole body's moving to the rhythm, but actually that you're losing the rhythm of the film. You know, I thought it was like, you know, I thought that was a bit too much, really. I love the score of the last two, and I particularly kind of love the changes.
Yes,
you know, that they brought in. So I think the live orchestra definitely elevated the whole thing. But I did think that, you know, that sometimes there was too much music. I
think in the first one, it certainly, the score kind of contributed to the feeling of chaos in the kind of chases towards the end, that probably also contributed to my confusion as to exactly like what the fuck was supposed to be going on.
Yeah.
But one thing that I really liked in the last film, the burglary film, during that set piece where in the fountain, is that the score always completely drops out during that set piece, and it became almost like Rafifi. Like it was all about just the action, and actually the score at that point dropping out means the action and the direction and what have you is completely privileged, and because there's no need to elevate that, it is so funny on its own.
Yes,
that there's no need to add anything, and actually it would be to its detriment if they did. And I really appreciate that, and I thought it was a really good decision.
The last one is directed by Leo McCarey, right, who is kind of one of the great directors of screwballs and, you know, of classic comedies. And, you know, he directed, my mind is going, the Bing Crosby film where he plays a priest. And the sequel with Ingrid Bergman. The Bells of St. Mary is the sequel.
Going My Way.
Going My Way, yeah.
Best director for Going My Way.
Yes. I hate those films. I think they're like Catholic propaganda, and I really despise them. I love his 1930s comedies, but I thought those are like really sentimental, and they're really Catholic propaganda and very conservative.
Yeah.
But you know, as we can see from this film, kind of very few people organize kind of, you know, a comic scene better than he does, really. And he also kind of did very famous melodramas, yeah? An Affair to Remember is one of them. He became really conservative and really reactionary. So he made My Son John, which I think is about communism and how horrible it is. And I think actually Going My Way, The Bells of St. Mary, and then it really begins to become like annoying. But My Favorite Wife, Love Affair, The Awful Truth, I mean, those are like some of the great kind of classics of Hollywood cinema. And of course, not to speak of Duck Soup and so on. So, and you can see kind of in this film, yeah, in that little short, yeah, how marvelously directed it is. Yeah, like, a, you know, kind of, I mean, there is a great kind of comic imagination with an architecture, like everything is structured, you know, and it's kind of like structured around rhythms, around audience expectations, around surprise, you know. I thought that was brilliant.
And the other name that we haven't mentioned amongst these films, we mentioned Chaplin, we mentioned Fatty Arbuckle, and
Stan Laurel,
Oliver Hardy.
Oh, sorry, Oliver Hardy.
Oliver Hardy,
yeah.
who is, you can say, he's very, very...
And Eugene Pallette.
Eugene Pallette. Very young Oliver Hardy in that.
Yes, he was wonderful.
And he's just playing a, you know, kind of a supporting part in that. The other name is Mack Sennett.
Yes.
Who she, I think, was kind of one of her main collaborators, certainly at Keystone, and who plays, in fact, that farmer character.
I didn't realise that.
Yeah. He plays the farmer character in the second film, the dramatic career one, and I think directed it.
Yes.
Who, you know, he was an interesting figure to look at, wasn't he?
Yes, I mean, well, he had his own studio, and these films were like massively popular, and a lot of people got their start with him. Gloria Swanson got his start with him as a Mack Sennett bathing beauty. Yeah. I think Carole Lombard got her start with him. I mean, he was seen as being like, you know, one of the leading purveyors of comedies and, you know, broad slapstick comedies in the teens and 20s, and very successful until, well, I can't remember now. I think I might be getting him kind of mixed up with Hal Roach. You know, because Hal Roach continued into the 30s and 40s. I'm not sure that Mack Sennett did. But anyway, you know...
Maybe one of the reasons that Mack Sennett's slightly forgotten these days. You know, you remember the names of Fatty Arbuckle and Charlie Chaplin and Hal Roach. But Mack Sennett tends to feel a little bit older, tends to feel a little bit more of his time in a way.
You remember the name because, you know, like all of those shorts carry his name. They're all kind of Mack Sennett films, and you know, Max. Yeah,
but you know what I mean. Like he's not the first name that comes to mind when people think of silent film in the way that he should be. I'm talking about in terms of like popular sort of understanding.
Obviously, film aficionados will see him as like one of the key major players, and particularly if you're a silent film geek, then, you know,
Yeah, absolutely.
he's like, you know, one of the mainstays, right? Like one of the central people. But it's true that, you know, if you're not...
Your regular man on the street will know Charlie
yeah.
Chaplin and may know kind of Buster Keaton.
Yes.
But won't have a chance of knowing Mack Sennett's name off the top of the head.
I mean, I was very surprised, you know, like kind of in the last year I've traveled to all these places, and some of them, you know, like Istanbul, right? Like, you know, you can go into a market and buy Charlie Chaplin statues, Charlie Chaplin piggy banks, Charlie Chaplin umbrellas. I mean, it's, you know, you saw more Charlie Chaplin than you saw, I don't know, Marilyn Monroe. Or, I mean, you know, you barely saw any of that, in fact. I mean, but it was just shocking how Chaplin lives, you know. So, and how Mabel Normand doesn't. I mean, there was no Mabel Normand, you know, statues or umbrellas, right? But Chaplin was...
well, I'd not heard of Mabel, unless I'd come across it during... Because I did study silent cinema with John at uni, and so, you know, I may have come across it then, but obviously never stuck with me, because to my knowledge this was the first Mabel Normand that I'd seen.
To my knowledge, this is the first Mabel Normand that I've seen as well. In fact, you know, I was worried and we checked at the beginning, because I love Chaplin's A Woman of Paris, and I thought that maybe the star of A Woman of Paris might have been Mabel Normand, but in fact it ended up being Edna Purviance, who is wonderful in the film. It's a wonderful, wonderful film. So in fact, I don't remember having seen her before either.
No, she did. She had her own production company as well. It was mentioned. I don't know that they was responsible for any of the films that we saw today.
I don't know.
But it was mentioned amongst the sort of blurb at the start of the program, and she died when she was 37.
Yeah, it's very young.
Very young.
It did what this program of films was meant to do, which is kind of spark an interest in this figure. I mean, I would be very, very happy to see many, many more Mabel Normand films and to explore her career, actually. You know, so I think, you know...
I'd be happy to see more as long as they also had Charlie Chaplin in. Well, she did have a partnership with Chaplin,
I actually would be interested in finding more of the ones that she directed and produced and so on. I mean, you know, in that respect, it seems that, you know, she might be like a kind of a key figure, you know, so kind of a, you know, I mean, there were many women directing in the silent period. They only began to be like excluded to the extent that they were with sound. I mean, all the major female stars, I think, you know, had directed. Lillian Gish directed, and Dorothy Gish directed, and, you know, and Gloria Swanson had her own production company, and blah blah. So, but still, I think I was delighted by what I saw, and I would like to know more.
Lovely.
So,
I had a good time too, in parts.
Okay, thank you, Grinch.
But thank you to Flatpack for putting it on.
Yes.
And we, you know, as you say, these events sort of that pop up in and around Birmingham, are exciting and interesting.
Yes.
And you know, it takes an organisation like Flatpack to do it, but we need to see more Flatpack, I think, because they are always around. Like I say, it's not just the festival. The festival's huge now.
Yes.
It's not just the festival. They are around all the time. They're always putting stuff on. I'm going to something next year, actually. I've already booked the tickets. It's this escape car thing, which I assume will be sort of film related as well.
Right.
You book a car. I'm doing it with Matt. You book a car, and then you have to somehow escape. I don't really know what the deal is, but looking forward to it.
All right. Well, thank you very much for listening. We are eavesdropping at the movies.
We're on iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter. And we're on eavesdroppingatthemovies.com. Cheerio.
Bye-bye.